Hello, and welcome to Where Do We Start? A podcast where we explore the stars, the self, and everything in between. I'm your host, Amber Mitchell, and today we're going to be talking about finding joy in solitude, embracing independence, and overcoming loneliness. So, I was inspired to do this episode because my husband recently went away for a trip for about a week, and I realized that this was going to be the first time that I was spending more than a few days alone in over 2 years. Now, for some context, I have lived alone before. I lived alone my sophomore and junior years of college, so that was in like apartment style dorms, but nonetheless, I was living alone. And then when I graduated college, I lived alone again for about a year after that. And I say this because I know a lot of people have never had that experience of living alone, be that because of family or relationships, whatever the circumstances are. But I had a lot of feelings about spending the week alone that surprisingly didn't come up until almost immediately after he left. And so I ended up spending that day. It was a Saturday. And on that day specifically, I realized that I started doing all these things that I wouldn't normally do on a Saturday just to kind of fill the space. So I went to the gym. That is normal for me to do on a Saturday, but I went to the gym. I washed clothes. I went out to eat to like a new place that I had never been to. I stopped somewhere to get something to eat actually while I was on my way back from the airport, just kind of taking the opportunity like, hey, I don't normally get to come this far, so I might as well go there. I cleaned my kitchen. I just started doing a bunch of things that I like. And I realized towards the end of the day, once I was taking a shower, that, oh, I've just been like filling the space. I've been trying to make myself busy. And then it kind of set in because normally my husband and I have a routine on Sundays that we have breakfast and we watch a show together. And I realized, of course, that that wasn't going to be happening on Sunday. And so suddenly I felt like I had all of this space to fill. And that's why I wanted to do this episode, because I realized I wanted to make that time intentional. I didn't want to feel lonely during that time, but I also wanted to take advantage of the opportunity of solitude. And so, what that week alone and what my past experiences with living alone have taught me is that there's a very big difference between solitude and loneliness. Now, of course, we all got a very up close and personal experience with solitude in 2020 when the world shut down and we were all forced to be a lot less social than we normally would. And since then, there has been somewhat of a loneliness epidemic. A recent study showed that over 61% of young Americans report feeling lonely most or all of the time. And these numbers are increasing globally as well. So the key differences between solitude and loneliness really all just comes down to our perspective on them. So we often associate loneliness with feelings of disconnectedness, isolation, and feeling empty. And this is also more often than not associated with little to no choice in being alone. Whereas with solitude, this is often a deliberate choice to be alone, and we associate that more so with self-reflection, healing, creativity, and restoration. And so this got me to thinking, what exactly is causing this epidemic of loneliness? I mean, we have more people on the planet than we ever have before. Well, one unsuspecting factor in this is social media. And I know, strange, the word social is right there in the name. You would think that it's something that draws us closer together. And while of course it can, the reality of the matter is most people are consumers of social media. They're not actively creating content on the platform and interacting with other people as a business. And so when you're on the other side of that glass, looking out at what appears to be people having the time of their lives, that can definitely create a sense of loneliness and missing out. And it also causes you to compare your life to others, creating unrealistic expectations of what you should be doing and how you should be living your life. The biggest factor of social media that creates loneliness is that it pushes us to value more time online, with a lot of people reporting that they feel addicted to their phones and addicted to social media. And so when that value is placed on time online, less value is placed on face-to-face connections. And one of the nuances of loneliness is that it doesn't always physically mean being alone. In fact, some of the most extroverted people also experience frequent feelings of loneliness. I saw a post from a friend earlier this week that I thought was brilliant and perfectly speaks to this. She said that when you have a high quality of people in your life, they add depth to your life. But when you have just a high quantity of people in your life, they add debt to your life. And so I thought this perfectly explains how you can have a whole crowd of people around you who are even interested in the same things that you are. But if you don't have meaningful connections with them, and if they're not adding value back to your life, it's very easy to feel lonely even in those circumstances. Now, another big factor of rising levels of loneliness is that culturally, we tend to value achievements and possessions as pathways to happiness. And in the current economy, even that is becoming increasingly difficult. And while I definitely want to dive deeper into that topic and how we solve that problem, as it relates to loneliness, this is just another factor that contributes to less focus on human connection and people feeling left out and lonely. So we talked about the key difference in solitude and loneliness being your perspective on it. And so when you change your perspective on being alone, you change your experience with it. But one of the things we have to first do is define, what does finding joy in solitude look like for you? Without the influence of the things I just mentioned, so social media, the people you surround yourself with, and societal pressures, how do you define joy in your everyday life? I'm such an introvert, and being an Aries and having my sun in the 12th house, especially for those of you with a little more astrology knowledge, if you know, you know. But I'm such an introvert that I almost always look at my alone time as a luxury. It's something that is highly valuable to me. And I also look at it like an opportunity. It's an opportunity for me to recharge, to focus on things without distractions, and to do the things that are my things, my special things. And so I mentioned a second ago that my husband and I have a routine on Sundays. We have a show that we watch together. And then I know a lot of people do this with the people that they love, right? You have your things that you do with certain people. But I think it's really important. A lot of people don't do this. They don't have things that they do just alone, things that are just for them. And so be it a coffee shop that you like to go to on Tuesdays, or a show that you like to watch on Thursday nights, or a park that you like to visit on Sundays. Whatever it is, even if it's just, a small hobby, if it's drawing in the afternoon, having the things that are specifically for you, things that you intentionally do alone, is so important in building that relationship with yourself and learning to like being alone. One of the toughest things about being alone is that feeling of emptiness. And especially, I think, when people who really experience deep feelings of loneliness, they know exactly what I'm referring to here, that feeling of emptiness. And so when you feel like there's this void, the task becomes filling the void, right? Filling all the gaps, filling the gaps emotionally, filling the gaps physically, filling the gaps mentally, whatever that is. So while my husband was away for a week, I mentioned that on the first day, I immediately got to filling the gaps, right? And I realized that for the rest of the week, I'd be doing a lot of filling a lot of gaps. And I assumed that I would be consuming a lot more media than I normally do, right? I thought I'd be watching a lot of TV, YouTube videos, other podcasts, music, just noise, right? Background noise to fill the spaces. But what I ended up doing, and not even intentionally at first, but what I ended up doing was actually leaning into that silence. So I got really intentional about the media that I was consuming and when I would consume it. With all of the silence that I had outside of my cat yapping at me, I found that I had so much more space to focus, and I used that silence in a way that felt extremely empowering and productive. I started to view the gaps as opportunities. I had so much more space to think and to focus and to really listen to myself more than I normally would. And so, one of the hardest things about spending time alone is that you may realize that you don't necessarily like yourself as much as you think you do, or you're not exactly who you think you are. And self perception is really funny like that. So consider this. Would you like to date you? Would you like to spend an entire day alone with you? Now, if you can answer yes to that question, then that's great. I love that. But the reality is, most people can't confidently answer yes to those questions. Enjoying solitude really means becoming your own best friend, becoming someone who you'd love spending time around. When you stop trying to fill the voids externally and you start filling that space intentionally with things that actually improve your life, right? Things that you actually enjoy doing, you pour back into yourself in a way that allows you to add more value to the people around you. During the time that I spent the week alone, I don't particularly enjoy cooking. I think I'm pretty good at it, but I don't particularly enjoy it. So I spent a lot less time cooking that week and a lot more time doing things that I enjoy. So I spent a lot of time researching because I'm a nerd. I like to research. I spent a lot of time writing. I spent a lot of time outside because the weather was absolutely perfect. It was in the mid 70s and sunny like every single day. And as someone who does deal with seasonal depression, I knew that was important for me to spend that time outside while it's sunny. But what this comes down to is just knowing myself well enough to know what things add value to my life, what things I feel are going to make me a better person and fill me in a way that when I am around people, I'm adding value to their life as well. And so many people that I know, and I'm sure you can probably think of at least one person that you know like this, tend to jump from relationship to relationship without taking much break in between, and they end up experiencing the same issues in those relationships. What I don't think that they realize is that so much of who they are and how they value themselves is based on who they're with. And while I do definitely agree with the sentiment that your vibe attracts your tribe, right? You are most like the 5 people that you hang around the most. But it really does yourself such a disservice to allow other people to define you and your value before even giving yourself the chance to do that. Or worse, you define the quality of your life and your happiness based on your relationships. And remember what I said before about quality relationships adding depth to your life and poor quality relationships adding debt to your life. There really is so much value in becoming the person that you'd love to date or becoming the person that you'd love to spend time with. After all, you don't attract what you want, you attract what you are. And you can bookmark that as something that we'll definitely come back to in a later episode. Another unexpected benefit to spending the week alone is that I realized there's a lot of little things that I will often ask for my husband's second opinion on or his help with. And while these things felt too minute to call him and bother him while he's on vacation to ask him about them, I did need those things done. I did need those things answered. And so I realized that I kind of had to trust my own instincts and my own opinion on these things a bit more than I have had to do in a long time. Solitude strengthens self-reliance. When you're alone, you get the chance to problem solve and care for yourself in a way that really builds your confidence in your abilities. Now, it can almost go without saying that as an introvert, I often find so much creativity and inspiration in silence. It's like when it's silent, I can really hear my inner voice, and she's got a lot to say. So the creativity just flows like crazy. And I know a lot of people are the opposite, right? They really feed off of the creativity of others. But it might surprise you how when you are alone and when you're in silence, there is a freedom of expectations that comes, and you're able to create so much more authentically than you normally would. So, I haven't really touched on the deeper elements of solitude, which is what really encompasses that 12th house energy. So, the 12th house in astrology is associated with solitude and healing. And getting to know yourself better, you really get up close and personal with some of those darker parts of you, right? You have to learn about the light and dark parts of yourself. And a lot of the time, this means getting to know the parts of you that you may not like very much. And we oftentimes struggle with really expressing and even understanding those deeper, darker elements of ourselves. And it's especially hard to do when we're constantly surrounded by people, because we either don't feel the safety to do that, right? You don't just pour out your heart to everyone you know. And you may not want to burden them with it. Like I said, I write a lot. And so journaling, praying, meditating, these are all really good ways to get to know yourself deeper. And some of your most profound moments of healing will come in that solitude. And it's in some of those moments of deep reflection and solitude that, for me at least, my definition of solitude completely changes, because I realize, and more so, I feel deeply inside that I'm not necessarily alone, right? There is a higher power that created you and that you belong to. And when you're alone, you can really feel that presence. I know it probably sounds super cliche for me to end this off with "you're never really alone," right? But I mean it. There's a whole network of souls that you're connected to, people you've not even met yet that want nothing but the best for you. So I hope that if there's nothing else that you take from this episode, let it be that. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode of Where Do We Start? If you enjoyed today's conversation, be sure to subscribe and leave us a review. It really helps others just like you find the show. If you like bonus exclusive episodes and deep dives on some of these topics, be sure to head over to Patreon and join our amazing community of Cosmic Cousins. And if you'd like daily updates, be sure to follow me on Instagram at theastrolotus. Until next time, take care and keep on shining.